Welcome. Nigeria has decided they've re-elected a president, Muhammadu Buhari, to chart the course of this country for the next 4 years. What are the issues arising? How did it go down? A lot more we will be discussing today. My name is Felicity Ezewuike.
And I am Ekene, Ezeji. Yes, indeed, some felt that moment would never come, but eventually, at some point past midnight, I believe, or early hours of the morning even, the news broke through that Muhammadu Buhari had been re-elected as our president going forward for the next 4 years.
4 years. But the amazing thing about this is the amount of people that came out to vote. Some say 20%, less than 30% of Nigerians decided who will be the next president of this country, when we had over 80 million registered voters.
And that's a fascinating statistic.
Exactly. And the gap between the leaders that came out, the two make
4 million.
Yeah, roughly 4 million to clinch the position Buhari gave to Atiku. Before we continue this conversation, let's take a look at that historic moment when the Independent National Electoral Commissioner, Yakubu Mahmood, gave the announcement.
I, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, hereby certify that I was the returning officer for the presidential election held on the 23rd day of February 2019, that the election was contested, that the candidates received the following votes. Muhammadu Buhari of the All Progressives Congress, having satisfied the requirements of the law and scored the highest number of votes, is hereby declared winner and is returned elected. Thank you.
There you have it. Yes. Nigeria's re-elected president, Muhammadu Buhari, being announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Yes.
A whole lot has been said. Some people are still describing our democracy, an offshoot of this, as still nascent, and you worry, is that really the case? Anyway, that's by the side.
Yes, I mean, as you spoke just before we turned off to watch the clip, I wondered if, you know, the whole issue of voters who bother to register and then don't turn up.
Voter apathy.
Yeah, you know, what are we looking at? So clearly, this is a game of numbers. This is one election we're going to have to scrutinize the figures and look at the discrepancy between those who turn up and maybe the states where, you know, the so-called swing states that seem to carry.
Yeah, I think for Muhammadu Buhari, some of the swing states, the analysts say, is Kano, Katsina, and Kaduna state. We also know that of the 36 states and the FCT, President Muhammadu Buhari won in 19 states, while Atiku won in 17 states. Buhari won in Bauchi, Borno, Ekiti, Gombe, Jigawa, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Kogi, Kwara, Lagos, Nasarawa, Niger, Ogun, Osun, Sokoto, Yobe, and Zamfara states. These are as declared by INEC. And of course, Atiku won in the southern side of the country, Abia, also part of the north, Adamawa, Akwa Ibom, Anambra, Bayelsa, Benue, Cross River, Delta, Ebonyi, Edo, Enugu, Imo, Ondo, Oyo, Plateau, Rivers, Taraba, and the FCT. For some people, the win in FCT was a surprise.
Yes. Oh, why a surprise? I wonder. That's interesting.
I really don't have an idea.
But one analyst, they said that's usually where they register their protest votes. So usually you can tell if the people, the executives, are happy with you, depending on how things go at that.
So if you won so massively in FCT, I mean, what could have gone wrong in other parts of the country? But what most everybody is agreeing is that it was a keenly contested election.
And actually, sometimes the difference came because now you mentioned 19 states as opposed to 17. Some would say that's not so significant.
Yeah.
But when you then look at the turnout, for example, in Abia State or even in Anambra, you then see that the wins in those states could have been much more massive, and that's probably where the difference was registered.
Comes in. The level in Lagos State, for instance, even though it was also a key state for Buhari, but you will notice that we had over 6 million people registered, only about 1 million registered. What happens to the other 5 million? Did they go on break, or did they travel out of the country?
That would be fascinating.
What exactly happened? Some have alluded to the fact that maybe the postponement might have, enhanced a dormant sense of this is how they do it. They're already rigging it. Why should I go ahead? No, that's what some people
would say that would ginger you to come out in your numbers, since you felt
different strokes
were against you.
Different,
or somewhere like Abia or even Anambra, where you maybe registered as many as, I'm trying to even remember if it wasn't more than 6 million in one of them. Or no, 2 million, sorry. And then the turnout was 600,000. So you still want to say, why do people bother to go and register, and then less than half of them, or less than a third turn out?
One analyst here at Plus TV Africa Studio was of the opinion that maybe they thought there would be other uses for the PVC. That was why they went out, not because they intentionally wanted to vote, but because of the possibility that this could be a yardstick for some, future endeavors. Anyway, let's just go check. There you have it on the screen, breakdown of the presidential election votes. Niger State results. You can see the position of the APC and the PDP. And of course, the issue of rejected votes was also a contention put up by the PDP as per the results announced. I think, let me see if I have that comment and Annex Chairman's reaction to some of the questions put forward by PDP. Of course, we'll be looking at how they're taking the news, their reaction compared to 2015. But before we do that, let's just go out to the field and find out how the mood is in Abuja, for instance.
I feel very happy. It's something we saw coming, because now if you talk about the president, you talk about uprightness, you talk about the president, you talk about legitimacy, you talk about the president, you see anti-corruption and a whole lot that just speaks well of a person, and we're all very proud to be associated with the person of President Muhammadu Buhari.
As a youth of Nigeria, I believe this is the way forward to this country and to my generation. And that is why we choose to bring him back for the second time. He's the best for us at this particular stage we are now.
So there you have it, the reaction of the voters on the ground at Abuja, the capital city. And clearly the two people we watched there were happy. They seem to be satisfied with the outcome. But we're not sure if that's the temperature across the country. So we'll be keen to find out from you, our viewers.
Our correspondent is actually out. As soon as she comes back in, hopefully we'll be able to get some of those reactions for you from among Lagosians and other Nigerians who have watched how the process unfolded. We're talking just before we played that video about the number of rejected votes.
And cancelled votes. I mean, to my understanding, there's a difference. I think rejected votes has to do with when you have overvoting, which again begs the question, why would such a thing arise?
With the card reader technology.
Yeah, so you'd have a certain number of registered voters, and then when it comes to voting, you have more people than are registered actually voting. And
how is that? Is it magic? Because we were assured that everything will go smoothly, and then at the end of the day, you see people saying, overvoting. Why would we have that in 2019?
Exactly, and the tragedy of that, if that's not sounding too dramatic, is that then results in the votes for that entire polling unit being nullified. So you could have voted in all, simplicity, only to find that because there were votes over and above the registered votes, your votes would have been nullified at that polling unit.
And so the interesting news we're also finding out is that Ezewuike, who pulled out at the last minute, garnered over 7,000 votes.
Yes,
and some persons are wondering, I mean, is it that...
Without even trying.
Exactly. Is it that the campaign on the social media information, the mainstream media telling people that this woman is no longer in the race, maybe didn't filter to rural areas, maybe people who had already made up their mind and somehow did not get to know that the woman is no longer in the race.
Could it be a protest?
It could also.
We'll have a female president, one way or the other.
There is that.
Yes.
You know, we've had several conversations about Nigeria's preparedness for a female president, and the way things are going, one wonders if that is a possibility even in 2023.
And maybe even looking a bit more at Obi Ezekwesili's own putting herself forward, because when you read some of the reasons she pulled out, you sort of wonder, is Nigeria ready for even the kind of candidate that she puts herself out as being, because she's not ready to compromise, and yet we know that a lot of the people who have succeeded in our politics as we know it have had to compromise in one way or the other. So are we really ready for that kind of politician who is ready to go put themselves forward based on their own convictions, based on what they believe, and according to how she presents herself? Are we really ready for that kind of president?
It's amazing, really, that, you know, people still came out, even some smaller parties that you think, okay, they're not going to get any sort of vote. They
managed to get something.
They got vote. That means Nigerians are actually listening. It's just quite unfortunate that less than 30 million Nigerians made the decision, turned out in this very historic election that we've just had. But again, I reiterate that analysts have said it's a keenly contested race. Yeah. All right, what we're going to do right now is take a look at what the PDP, how they're reacting to it. We're still going to get you reactions from across Nigeria and what people are saying. But of course, the main opposition party, unlike 2015, have reacted, not the way you would expect, like their predecessor Jonathan. So we'll just take a short break, and we will come back. We'll take a break now, and we'll come back and continue the conversation. To stay with us. Glad you're still with us. This is Nigeria Decides on Plus TV Africa. We've been at this long before February, bringing you up to speed on all the latest information. The whole culmination for the presidential event ended yesterday with the announcement of Muhammadu Buhari as the re-elected president of Nigeria. Of course, we still have some elections to go. We have the governorship coming up in a few days from now. Still talking about the outcome of the presidential election. Before we went on that break, we're talking about the win itself and some of the matters arising of that is the PDP's reaction to it. Right there at the Coalition Center, they started. Osita Chidoka had a lot of questions to ask. Before we get into the conversation even, again, let's take a look at that question and the answer session, and of course the INEC chairman's reaction to it.
We have evidence from the smart card reader accreditation data that what is being announced by INEC has been seriously tampered with and manipulated to suit the All Progressives Congress. In the meantime, we demand the immediate and outright cancellation of presidential election results in Yobe, in Zamfara, in Nasarawa, and Borno State as submitted by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. In Yobe, the total number of votes submitted as cast was more than the number of accredited voters, whereas the number of accredited voters was 601,056 votes. The total votes cast was 775,449. This is a clear case of our voting, which by the provisions of the Electoral Act renders the election null and void. In such instance, the law provides for another election on a day to be fixed by INEC in consultation with all the political parties.
That's the official reaction of the PDP to the election. I was thinking we're going to bring you the Osita Chidoka. I'm sure we'll get that to you subsequently as the program unfolds.
But did you take note of that, actually, the discrepancy between the two? More than 1,000 more votes than registered votes. So it tells you that there's something not quite in order.
Yeah. The PDP, even before the election was over, had issued a statement saying they will not accept the election results due to what they call as fraud, electoral fraud that was committed. Interestingly, the candidate of that party has also come out, that's Atiku Abubakar, to
make his statement. Yeah, clearly rejecting the results. And I think one of the statements that seems to be making the rounds is that he says democracy will not be emasculated in Nigeria. That's
actually the title of his statement. He's saying, a lot of persons are expecting that he would have called, and in his statement he said, if I had lost in a free and fair election, I would have called the victor within seconds of my being aware of his victory to offer not just my congratulations, but my services to help unite Nigeria by being a bridge between the North and the South. And in the same breath, he went on to say, I have never seen our democracy so debased as it was on Saturday, and consequently, I hereby reject the result of February 23, 2019 sham election and will be challenging it in court. Well, were you expecting this, Ekene?
In a way, actually. But in a way, yes, actually. I'm trying to think how else it could have panned out. But I think this was almost inevitable. I think whichever side had won, the other side I was expecting to reject because the stakes were so high.
Yeah, but before the election, the case of Buhari was like a clear-cut. He would say, I will be the winner. I will congratulate myself. If I remember correctly,
yes,
the president did say that. And then when Atiku was asked the same question, he said, well, I'm a Democrat. That's the only thing I heard. And I think that's the basis some persons are now saying. I think almost immediately after the announcement of the result, one of the APC chieftain was seen as saying that what is left is for the Democrat to now call in and concede defeat.
Yes,
well, that doesn't seem to be in the offing.
I mean, it's challenging it on the basis that it wasn't free and fair. But thankfully, we have statistics that can hopefully give us more light on the issue, help us understand how free and how fair the elections actually were on the ground. So it's a fascinating race. The other aspect which I was mentioning to you, Felicity, was that, in as much as the PDP are challenging the results, we would like to see the Nigerian people themselves and their own response to the results. Do they feel that democracy has been emasculated? Is that the reaction, or is it a case of we accept what has happened and we're ready to move on?
Well, I think you said something earlier about Nigerians not sure who to believe in anymore as it is. And going by, funny enough, on social media, if you go by what is on social media, and that's why all constituted authority have advised severally that we tread with caution when it comes to information we glean on social media. The social media champions were at it, and you would have thought that those results that were being put out there and the way people were talking, there would be some sort of reaction to what has happened. But of course, it will be all talk, and at the end of the day, we will...
Speaking of which, I know earlier on we were talking, well, the results are on the screen just for us to remind ourselves of the gap between the two candidates. 15,191,847 votes for the incumbent and 11,262,978 votes. But going back to what we had discussed earlier, I think we mentioned about Lagos, because going by the steam coming off the social media platforms, the impression was that Lagosians would turn out in their numbers to make their voices heard. But somehow, that is one area people have been surprised at the low turnout. As opposed to 6 million, over 6 million who were registered, we had just 1 million who turned out to make their voices heard in the end.
Quite unfortunate. Another thing that came up of that statement by Atiku was the comment about militarization of the election process, and he described this as a disservice to the democracy, and he's alleging that it's a throwback to the jackboot era of military dictatorship. We've had a series of analysts come on our studio here and say that they actually do not agree that there was a militarization of the process. Yes, we really didn't need the army. The policemen that we see, you and I were out on the field, we saw some security personnel, some of them were not armed, but
In fact, some of them were impotent, seemingly, in the face of the hooligans. But he did highlight the areas, like he said, in some areas,
in Rivers State, for instance,
Imo State, troops were deployed for the elections and turned out with guns.
Yeah, to his credit, he wasn't just making comments, but unverified videos on Twitter was the links. We read some of those stories on online platforms and, of course, mainstream media. Some links to the video he shared was mainly on social media that others shared to, you know, as evidence of electoral violence. We had cases in Rivers. We had cases where we saw someone actually saying that a lady was, you know, macheted. Yeah, I saw the video of that as well, because she refused to vote for a particular candidate.
Again, it would be helpful to know how many of those videos can be verified. You know, you can actually trace back to an actual event, because a lot of what we see these days, you have to call a lot of that into question. So
yeah, we will have this conversation more and maybe get some perspective on it when our guests join us. We'll go on a short little break. We'll be right back.